Behind every badge is a promise to protect. But when officers abuse that power, the damage runs deep. One man bled out in a stairwell, another was robbed by those sworn to serve. Here are 3 instances of dirty policing.
On Hanson Highway, Warrington gets out to help, but moments later fires a single shot at the passenger who says he was getting a hat blown onto the road.
On March 1st, 2017, 7 members of the Baltimore's elite gun trace track force walked into the Internal Affairs office thinking they were clearing up a minor issue about a city vehicle. They had no idea they were walking straight into a federal sting.
It's a scandal that came to light in 2017, rocking the city and police department. A total of 8 officers.
As the elevator door opens, they were greeted by armed FBI agents. Within seconds, all 7 officers were handcuffed, including their leader, Sergeant Wayne Jenkins. Up to that point, they had a reputation as some of the hardest working cops in Baltimore. They were celebrated for getting illegal guns and drugs off the streets. Jenkins, especially, was seen as a standout, aggressive, productive, and reliable. His supervisors praised his numbers. His name looked good in reports.
The task force's misconduct has tainted hundreds, if not thousands, of criminal cases. And in a city already infamous for horrible policing, it's shattered any remaining trust between cops and the community.
But what the FBI had uncovered was a unit that had gone rogue. Federal investigators had been watching the team for months. They had tapped phones, planted hidden mics, and followed every move. What they found wasn't just misconduct, it was organized criminal activity behind the badge.
Here they were zooming in on the person walking towards their vehicle. As you can see, they're using a scope for this as the camera was placed in the very corner.
These officers weren't just falsifying paperwork or bending protocol. They were robbing citizens during traffic stops, raiding homes without warrants, stealing cash, and flipping seized drugs back into the streets. Some were claiming overtime pay for shifts they never worked. Others were dealing weapons. It wasn't sloppy police work, it was structured, deliberate, and protected by silence. 5 of the officers, including Jenkins, admitted guilt. The remaining 2 went to trial, and that's when the full picture came out.
Anything you want to say on behalf of Wayne?
Jenkins' family had nothing to add outside of court today, but
in early 2018, a series of witnesses took the stand and described how they were targeted, robbed, and ignored when they tried to speak out. Many had records, some were in the drug trade themselves, but they all said the same thing. They knew no one would believe them over a police officer. One man, Sean Whitting, testified that $16,000 and over a kilo of heroin were taken from his home during an illegal search. He didn't even try to report it. It didn't matter what I said, he told the jury. They were going to believe the badge. Several of the officers also testified, now in prison uniforms instead of body armor. They revealed that Jenkins was the driving force behind it all. They said he trained them on how to steal without getting caught, how to carry fake guns they could plant during shootings, how to raid dealers' homes and keep the money or stash the drugs. He called certain suspects monsters, the ones he believed were holding serious weight, and made them targets for cash grabs. Senator Bill Ferguson had something interesting to say.
How could the system have failed this badly for this long?
One of the biggest shocks came from Donald Stepp, a bail bondsman and longtime friend of Jenkins. Stepp told the court that Jenkins would bring him large amounts of stolen drugs straight from crime scenes, and together they sold them on the street. The scale? Over $1 million in narcotics. Jenkins never took the stand, but his name came up in every testimony. The instigator, the planner, the one who taught others how to abuse the system while keeping the paperwork clean. He was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison, the longest sentence of the group. The rest of the unit received prison terms ranging from 7 to 8 years. But just when the story seemed over, something unexpected happened. 4 years later, while journalist Jessica Lusenhop was wrapping up a podcast about the case, Jenkins called her from prison. He wanted to talk. Right away, he tried to reframe the narrative. "I wasn't living some big lifestyle," he said. "We weren't getting rich. I didn't take cash from regular people because I didn't want them to know I was dirty. He admitted to giving stolen drugs to Stepp in his final years as an officer, but insisted he never shook down citizens for money. In his mind, he still had a line he didn't cross. Then, he opened up about how it started. He was still new on the job. During a search with a more experienced officer, they found a suitcase full of cash. Jenkins said the older cop nudged him. He didn't tell me to do anything, just looked at the money and said, "Wouldn't it be nice to have 10 grand for Atlantic City?" That was the first time Jenkins pocketed cash, and he said once it started, it was hard to stop. Today, Jenkins is locked up. His earliest release date, 2038. He still claims he wasn't greedy, that he didn't live large, that he followed some kind of twisted code, but what he and his team did, it left a trail of broken trust, not just in Baltimore, but across the country. If you thought Baltimore's gun trace task force was the peak of criminal activity under a badge, think again. Because just as that crew was running their side hustle on the East Coast, out west, a different kind of scandal was already shaking Los Angeles to its core. In 1988, David Mack joined the Los Angeles Police Department. By the late 1990s, he'd built a reputation as a fearless officer in the department's crash unit, the elite gang task force notorious for aggressive tactics and murky ethics.
LAPD officer who was arrested for robbing a bank in late 1997. Because this raid provided Poole with most of his actual, so-called evidence, all of it circumstantial, that he would then use to tie Mack to Biggie's murder. But here, I'm going to show you the LAPD investigation's official follow-up report for the raid on David Mack's house. And like so many of the other case files that I've shared, once you actually look at the evidence, you'll see that almost everything that has been reported about this raid is false. Eight months after Biggie's murder, on November 6, 1997, LAPD officer David Mack robbed this bank near USC's campus in Los Angeles, making off with a staggering $722,000.
But in 1997, Mack made a move that stunned even the most jaded critics of the LAPD. He walked into a Bank of America branch in Los Angeles and walked out with $722,000 in cash. To understand how Mack got here, you have to look at the culture that surrounded him. Crash units were created to fight gang activity in Los Angeles, but they often operated like gangs themselves.
Arrives on scene to provide backup. Moments later, the deputy realizes a passenger has a gun. Bullets fly before officers fire back, one of them firing on the driver's side with the driver sitting right there.
Officers were encouraged to show results, guns off the street, arrests made, drugs seized. For some, like Mack, it became a breeding ground for power, control, and eventually, greed.
You wanna hook her up?
Yeah. Do me a favor, turn around for me. Turn around. Turn around.
Speed detained.
The robbery was inside work. Mack's girlfriend, Erilyn Romero, was a manager at the bank. On the day of the robbery, she ordered double the usual amount of cash to be kept on hand. When Mack arrived, claiming to access his deposit box, Romero led him through the secured door. Mack threw her to the floor, pulled a gun, and emptied the vault. In truth, the whole scene was staged. She wasn't a victim, she was in on it.
One of them was a guy who stole a van from a budget rent-a-car near LAX the day before to use as their getaway vehicle. Another conspirator was Mack's so-called girlfriend, who worked at this bank branch as the branch customer service manager, and who moved funds around that morning so there would be far more cash on hand than normal, $722,000, equivalent to $1.4 million in today's money, ensuring the score was bigger. Unfortunately for Mack, having the extra cash on hand raised suspicions.
It didn't take long for federal investigators to connect the dots. Romero cracked under pressure, confessing to her role and naming Mack as the mastermind. He was arrested a month later.
6 weeks after the bank robbery, police arrested David Mack for the crime. But even his arrest has been misrepresented.
Despite his conviction and a 14-year prison sentence, Mack never revealed where the money went. His two unidentified accomplices were never caught. But Mack's crimes didn't end with the robbery. His name would later resurface in one of the most explosive allegations in music and criminal justice history: the murder of rapper Christopher Wallace, aka the Notorious B.I.G. Former LAPD detective Russell Paul alleged that Mack, along with other officers, had ties to Death Row Records and were possibly involved in Wallace's killing. The theories gained traction, but never led to a conviction. Still, the suspicions only deepened the public's distrust in the LAPD.
David Mack is at the scene. David Mack has something to do with it. If David Mack sends $7,000 to Rafael Perez for being there, Rafael Perez has something to do with it. If it's a special bullet called Gecko, and they find it at David Mack's house, this is a rare bullet that is traced. It pierced armor. It wasn't showed up at nobody else's house, but it showed up at David Mack's house. Why? Man, LAPD has something to do with Biggs' murder. Point blank.
Even after serving time and being released in 2010, Mack remained silent about the heist. The money never recovered. The full truth still buried. His story wasn't just about a cop going rogue, it was about a system that allowed corruption to thrive unchecked. As outrageous as Mack's story is, it didn't involve a gun going off in a stairwell. It didn't end in blood, at least not directly. But the next case did, and it started with something so ordinary it could happen to anyone: a broken elevator. On November 20th, 2014, 28-year-old Akai Gurley was at the Louis H. Pink Public Housing Complex in Brooklyn, New York, getting his hair braided by his girlfriend. When the couple decided to leave, they took the stairs because the elevator was out of service. The stairwell lights were broken. It was pitch black.
Inside the Pink Houses in East New York in November, rookie officer Peter Liang and his partner were on patrol when Liang shot and killed Akai Gurley, an unarmed man. Police called it an accidental discharge, but Gurley's family never believed that. The family attorney described Gurley's mother's reaction.
At the same time, two rookie NYPD officers, Peter Liang and Sean Lando, were conducting a vertical patrol inside the building. Liang opened the door to the stairwell with one hand holding a flashlight and the other gripping his service weapon. When he heard a noise, he flinched, his gun discharged. The bullet ricocheted off the wall and hit Gurley in the chest. Gurley, unarmed and completely unaware of the officers, tried to flee. He collapsed a few floors down, dying from the wound. Neither Liang nor Landu administered CPR. Instead, Liang ratioed his union rep. Emergency services were delayed. Gurley died at the scene. The public response was immediate and emotional. It wasn't just about the accidental shot, it was the inaction afterward. A man was bleeding to death and no help came. Liang was eventually convicted of manslaughter, but was sentenced to probation and community service. Landau wasn't charged.
As to count one, charging the defendant, Peter Liang, with the crime of manslaughter in the second degree. What is your verdict?
Guilty.
As to count five, charging the crime of official misconduct. What is your verdict?
Guilty.
Foreperson, please be seated. Members of the jury, hear your verdict as it stands recorded. You say you find the defendant, Peter Liang, guilty as to count one, charging the crime of manslaughter in the second degree, and guilty as to count five, charging the crime of official misconduct. Is this your verdict, and so say you all?
Yes.
Does either side request the polling of the jurors?
We don't.
Members of the jury, please answer the following question.
Gurley's family sued the city and received a settlement, but no amount of money could fill the loss. Like so many before him, Gurley became another name in a long list of men failed by the very people sworn to protect them.
Buried Akai Gurley's casket into the Brown Memorial Baptist Church, where his wake drew dozens.
It hurts. It hurts.
If these stories moved you, help more people see the truth. Like, subscribe, and share. We're telling the stories that matter, the ones they'd rather you forget. More cases are coming. Stay with us.